a shit.
I don't care.
Ooh. All right, guys, we're sitting down here today with Coach Thick discussing the
What's up, guys?
Deadload arms. So, what are they and how do they work?
Deadload arms. So it's short for dynamic, eccentric, accentuated loading, right? And the arm part comes in from the fact that it's a lever arm that's providing the resistance, right? So it's a lever arm that you load with barbells, and when the weight's up, it's a little bit lighter. As that arm comes down, right, it gets a little bit heavier, right? So what we're taking advantage of there is you're able to overload the eccentric portion of the lift, right? So as the cable system, as you contract, right, this little arm's going to come up, it's going to get lighter, and as you ease back, right, into the eccentric, it's going to come down and get heavier, right, causing you to recruit a little bit more maximally in that eccentric position.
So, how is this different than bands and cables, which also get heavier? How is that?
Yeah, good question. We get that one a lot. So it's actually the reverse
Okay.
of bands and chains, right? Not curve for curve, right? Chains are going to be kind of a linear fashion where it's going to load as those links leave the floor, right? So you're going to get this kind of very linear loading style. So as I push, right, or I pull, the chains are coming off the floor and it's getting heavier and heavier and heavier, right? Bands, as a pull, right, those bands start to stretch, it's going to start to get heavier and heavier, but a little more exponentially, right? With the dead load arm, right, as I pull, it's actually getting lighter as that arm comes up, right? So it's getting lighter, and you might be like, well, why do I want it to get lighter as I come up? Well, it's not so much about the concentric portion, right? At least not in terms of hypertrophy, right? So this is kind of more of a hypertrophy stimulus. It's also great for neurologic work or strength work, but we'll get that in a minute. So you've probably seen a lot of the research lately around like lengthened partials and stretch muscle positions and a lot of the benefits of hypertrophy, right? And how to kind of maximize your gains, right? By training in those more lengthened positions, right? So this is just taking advantage of exactly that, right? So there are some pieces of equipment on the market right now that allow you to overload lengthened positions, but they tend to be very specific pieces, like a leg extension where you can overload the lengthen, or a leg curl, right? This is actually a lever arm built into a functional trainer, like a multi-function functional trainer. So you can adjust the cables up and down.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. And so we kind of looked at the cable machine as kind of, hey, this is the most universal machine we have in the gym, and it's also one that a lot of people have at home, right? And they can really do a lot of exercises with a multi-function cable machine. How do we then, it's easy to add accommodating resistance to a lot of these pre-existing systems, right? They have weight horns or something. You add chains to them, or you could add bands to them, right? Several companies on the market actually make band attachments on their cable machines. But nobody, as far as, in our research, was able to add that kind of reverse accommodating or eccentric accentuated loading, right? So as you stretch, right, normally as you're coming into a stretch position with a band or something, it's getting lighter, right? And so you're turning muscle fibers off, right? So or with a straight weight, as you're easing, you're just kind of easing and you turn the muscle fibers off, right? This one, as it's getting heavier, you're actually having to recruit more and turn more on, right? So you're adding more, and it's kind of really accentuating that stretched position, giving you more bang for your buck in terms of hypertrophy, right? So it's really just taking advantage of that system and a lot of that research kind of surrounding that, right?
You said that it also helps with neurological training. How is that?
Yeah, so the most important strength for athletes, right? Track and field athletes or strength athletes is a property we call starting strength, right? So quick example for a power lifter at the bottom of a bench press, your ability to recruit the maximum number of muscle fibers to accelerate the weight off your chest, right, is going to be indicative of that's a successful bench press or not, right? For a squat, it'll be the bottom of the squat, right? Or deadlift from the floor. This, you'll be able to actually, we have it made so that you can attach the cable system to a barbell, and then it'll work like weight releasers, right? So a lot of people have a lot of success developing that starting strength weight releasers, right? You pick it up, you come down, and then as you get towards the bottom, the weight falls off, and then you press up, right? So it's causing you to recruit more and then use that extra recruitment to fire off the chest, right, in a bench press.
But
or out of the hole.
weight releasers, this would stay with you on the way up.
Exactly, right? So that's the limitation of the weight releasers, is that it's a one-off rep, right? This one, it comes down, loads you, and then unloads you, and then loads you again. So you don't have, this could be accomplished with weight releasers, but you have to have a person on each side, and you have to pause at the top so that they can put the weight releasers on there, adjust, and then come down for the rep again, right? This will be a much smoother, pretty much zero transitions, right? So you're coming down, and then you're pressing. Then you're coming down, and you're pressing, right? And it's just repeatedly loading you over and over again, right? And helping you develop that starting strength property.
So any pulley movements and any barbell movements you can do, are there any limitations there?
You know, we made the other cool part of it is it has an adjustable cable system, right? So you can actually adjust the cable lengths kind of on the go or on demand. So yeah, you'll be able to adjust the cable up or down. As far as any barbell movements, people always dream up some crazy stuff, So, but for a squat, bench, deadlift, even certain positions of the clean and jerk, you're going to be able to overload those portions, right? Deadlift, you'll be able to overload the bottom portion of a deadlift, right? The bench press, you'll be able to overload the bottom portion of a bench press. And with the squat, you'll be able to overload the bottom portion of that squat, right? And then for, depending on the Olympic lifting goal, if you're bad off the floor, you can add that starting point to right off the floor, right? If you're bad at, from the second pull, you can add that weight right at the second pull, right? And yeah, just wherever you need kind of that resistance profile to hit.
So the resistance is almost similar to doing like a T-bar row, where as it's going down, it's getting heavier, just any...
Exactly, right? So the same principle as a T-bar row. The T-bar comes down, the weight in the hand is going to get heavier just by a property called torque, right? So it's the weight multiplied by the lever arm, right? So the arm comes down, lever arm gets greater, the weight gets heavier in the hand, you pull it up, it gets a little bit lighter as you come up, right? With a T-bar, you're kind of fixed in this kind of position, so you're not seeing as big of a change in the resistance profile. It's not as big as most people think. It ends up being maybe about 5, maybe 10% if you're really coming up on a T-bar row. This one, you're going to see all the way from a negative, I think it's like a negative 8 degrees, all the way to a positive 85 degrees.
Wow.
Right. So, and then the sweet spot for this thing is right between 25 and 85, where you go from roughly 95% of the load on the arm to approximately 30% of the load on the arm, or maybe even like 28%, a little bit less.
So when you say sweet spot, how would you actually utilize that in practice?
Yeah, so you're not always, we made this very adjustable, right? So that, but depending on different travel lengths, like a tricep press has a different travel length than, let's say, a bicep curl, or maybe different than a kickback, right? So we made it so that you can adjust that starting point of the lever arm with the integrated trolley system, right? So you're like, okay, maybe I have a very long lever, like I'm doing a lat pull down, right? Or a kickback, right? With something with a lot of travel. I might want to set that lever arm to, the negative 8 degrees, and it's going to come up almost all the way to the 85, and I'm going to utilize that entire range of motion, right? So maybe something with a little bit shorter length, like a wrist curl or something like that, right? Maybe we want to start that thing up a little higher, right? So we can set that adjustment point to maybe have that lever arm start at 25, and then maybe it ends at roughly 75, right? So we're taking advantage of a bigger change in weight, right? So that we're adding that starting strength over and over again, and we're seeing that result, right? Because if you're just kind of sitting from here to here, like in a T-bar row, you're only maybe getting a 5% change. That's probably not going to have the effect as a bigger change in weight and actually getting more muscle recruitment, right?
How much travel or does it have access to? I think a normal cable tower probably is 48 inches?
Yeah, so that's the other cool thing we built into it, right? Different cable towers have different heights, right? So we built the standard to have roughly 48 inches or 4 feet of cable travel, and that'll be in the 2-to-1 pulley configuration. For like shorter movements, like I talked about, like wrist curls earlier, you can actually quick adjust it and do a 1-to-1, where you're getting about 2 feet of travel and you're getting that full range of motion on the cable system. And then you can actually swap it over to 3-to-1, where you're going to get 6 feet of travel distance in the cable machine. So we really tried to build it for kind of all rig sizes and different exercises, right? But also, like, you're switching from a risk, like, so you're a fixed rig size. You have maybe a 100-inch rack with 4 feet of travel, right? You're going to be going from a cable curl over to a bicep curl or tricep press, right? We wanted to make it so that we get more travel with the wrist curls because it's a smaller range of motion. So you just switch that over into a 1-to-1 with just a simple quick release, and then you're kind of off to the races, right? So we also figured out that people won't use this thing unless it's convenient, right? So we try to build in as much convenience into this product as possible.
Are there any limitations as far as, like you said, rigs go? Like, what companies can you utilize this the Deadload arm on?
So the Deadload arm, and we'll have all the measurements up on the website when we do the official product launch. But essentially, any rig that has a 3x3 hole pattern with 2-inch spacing should be compatible with this system. I modeled it off of rep racks and rogue racks, because those are the ones we had access to. But as long as the measurements line up, it should be compatible with any 3x3 rack with 2-inch spacing, either 5/8-inch holes or 1-inch holes. The only difference is with the 5/8-inch holes, you'll have to buy the additional adapter kit to take advantage of the 5/8-inch holes and the Deadload arm system. So.
And then you mentioned that it's essentially a functional trainer. So do you have to utilize the Deadload function of it?
Yeah, so that was the other thing, right? It's like, well, if I have one functional trainer, do I want to be limited to only having this eccentric, accentuated resistance loading trial every time? Like, me personally, no. So, especially and for home gym owners, this is going to be a huge thing. So, we made it so that, once again, it's just a quick release, right? So if you don't want to use the loading arm, you just unquick release it, and then you have a loading trolley where you just attach straight weight to, and then it's the same resistance the entire time. Also built into that is the ability to utilize your band pegs that you have on your existing rack. So you toss a band peg in the lower hole, attach it to the trolley, and then you have accommodating resistance, or you can even put chains on there if you want to, right? So you're getting that linear accommodating resistance from the chains. And in that fashion, you're getting 3 different resistance profiles all built into one machine. So accentuated eccentric loading, traditional accommodating resistance, and then just traditional straight weight pulley system. Will blow your mind?
I don't think we have anything else, right? I think that's it.
Yeah.
I think that went really well.
Yeah. Well, that's it for Coach Thick and his sidekick.
It's just gonna get cut out.
Putting that in my version.